Welcome to the Analytics Engineering Podcast, featuring conversations with practitioners inventing the future of analytics engineering.
On this episode, Tristan and I sit down with Yannick Misteli, who's the head of engineering for the go-to-market domain of Roche. Roche likely needs no introduction, but just in case, they are a Global 500 company in the pharma and diagnostics industry. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Yannick for a number of years because Roche was an early supporter of dbt Cloud, and he entertained a lot of my product ideation conversations with him and really had a lot of interesting ideas about the way that the industry should move. Yannick helped move his team of now 120 plus engineers to a modern data stack, and he always found a way to push the boundaries in making a large company founded in 1896 incredibly modern and innovative. I wanted to know more about the how behind the work, so I invited him onto the show to learn more.
What I loved about this conversation is that as all great practitioners and leaders in working with data, Yannick had an appreciation of all of the things outside of technology. He certainly was deep on the technology side, but he had real respect for the people and the process parts of the equation. He even referred to at one point in his career, like when I developed some of those soft skills. But it's like, it's a part of many of our professional journeys where a lot of us get into what we do because we're fascinated by the technology. And he has clearly been through this journey and learned all of the pieces of the puzzle. To get large, complex organizations to use cutting edge technology takes a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's right. We go into some of his background, and he's an engineer by training. He has actually a lot of really interesting background in chemistry. And I think for him, he thinks technology will only get you so far, and that it's also about like, how do you set up an organization for success? So I like this episode because it's really good for data leaders at particularly large organizations. And how do you create the right people, process, and technology to be successful? And I think he lays out a really interesting roadmap on how to do exactly that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Yannick, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm super excited to have Yannick on the show. We've known each other for a couple of years now, mostly as I ask Yannick about crazy product ideas that I have, and Yannick indulges and gets excited about them as well. But Yannick is the head of engineering for the go-to-market domain of Roche, a $250 billion pharmaceutical and diagnostics company. And I want to hear, I guess, a little bit more about how you found your way to Roche and what part of the team that you help operate.
Sure. I started with my journey. So I studied computer science here at the Technical University at ETH in Zurich. Did my PhD in high performance computing and quantum physics. And as part of the graduate program, spent some time at UC Berkeley in California. After academia, I started my professional career in private banking with Julius Baer, multinational private bank in Zurich, because, in Switzerland, it's either chocolate, banking, or pharma, right? So I ended up in finance.
You didn't pick
chocolate? Yeah, maybe chocolate would have been the sweeter choice for sure.
No watches?
Oh, yeah, watches. That would also have been a good option indeed, yeah. But I picked private banking, and it was very interesting because I was in advisory, which is in the middle of everything, right? So you get to see investment recommendations, portfolio management, risk management, financial planning. It was also nice because it was quite a big bank, but not too big. So you get to see things really end to end. And I had a great time there. But ultimately, also, I realized I wanted to do more cloud stuff. And at that time, banking was not that into cloud computing at all. So that's when I decided to move on. And then I went into cloud consultancy for Teradata, which was also super interesting because they sent me across Europe for different industries. So I got to see telco, oil and gas, aviation, consumer goods.
And was that during the transition? Because they were like initially a big on-prem shop as well, and then made a huge push into the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the time they wanted to really push also their cloud offerings. And that's also for me, it was great to see also the different states of the different companies on how far they are on that journey. or, well, in retrospect, also how not far they were on that journey. I could really see that a lot of companies are struggling. So the banking and finance sector was not the only one, which was also a good experience to see that it's not that great. I was hoping for more, but then ultimately consultancy also was something that for me I was lacking ownership. Ultimately, that's why I wanted to move on. So I wanted to get more skin in the game. And this is actually where I got the offer from Roche for exactly doing that, to start to build up something in the data and analytics area. Throughout my career, I was also a salsa dance teacher. And I think this is also...
That's important, yes.
So this is maybe also where I got all my soft skills, because in the technical university is not something that you get taught. But for me, that was a great experience to have this, the dancing and artsy world also that was teaching me the soft skills.
Very cool. I haven't even started to formulate questions on that topic yet. But, can we go back to your PhD? Did you say high performance computing and quantum computing? Did I hear that right?
Quantum physics. So we
quantum
did
quantum physics. Okay.
Yes. So basically we wrote simulations code on those like big machines. That's also why I spent some time in the US, because there are the big supercomputers are over there. And for me, of course, that was extremely challenging and on two fronts. And one is like pushing really the boundaries on the computational computing front, but also on quantum physics front, right? Which is also quite complicated. So it was challenging on many dimensions.
I don't know that this is going to be a useful question to anybody except for me, but there are some workloads that are very memory intensive and require a tremendous amount of like shared memory between like different compute nodes. And my understanding is that like that's generally what high performance computing is doing, because for workloads like that, at least cloud architecture that we commonly think about, which is like lots of smaller machines, doesn't work as well. I'm really curious to get you to whatever extent you have an opinion on this. How has high performance computing and the needs for high performance computing shifted as like the cloud has become much more of a thing?
High performance computing has highly influenced cloud computing. I think it more like that way. For me personally, it was also a perfect basis that I got in high performance computing that now I can leverage in cloud computing. So you learn a lot about high level, low level optimizations that then you can also leverage nowadays. I mean, high performance computing and cloud computing, I think you can compare it like NASCAR driving to like street car driving, right? It's just like more specialized in that sense, but a lot of the concepts are very, very similar.
I think I'm not in the space, and most of our listeners are not in the space, but my understanding is that high performance computing is not by any sense displaced by the cloud. The types of workloads that you would run in that environment are just not the same types of workloads that you just kind of throw into AWS. Can you give me a sense for like, what is somebody doing in an HPC cluster that they wouldn't do in a cluster that they kind of built out of commodity hardware in EC2 nodes?
I mean, it's very specialized simulations most of the time. So quantum physics is one of the big fields. Also, weather simulations, I think, are also big fields that run on those big machines. So there's a lot of research in that area that really needs like this high performance compute power that commodity hardware can actually not provide, because commodity hardware is too fail intensive. So this is a scale that people cannot even imagine, right? I mean, all this computation that you need to do, memory failures that can occur, you need to account for all that. That's why you really need dedicated hardware to do that kind of computing.
And these used to be built by colleges, like universities, and maybe like some of the very largest companies in the world for their own use. Who is building? Are there pseudo cloud vendors for HPC today? Like you rent space on this?
There is I think all the big cloud providers now have also a high performance computing offering. Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
All right, Julia, I'm done. That was a total digression, but I've never gotten to talk to somebody in depth about that before. So maybe, Yannick, one day I'll be able to buy you a beer and pick your brain more.
Sure. Happy to talk about my origins in high performance computing.
I mean, Roche probably uses some as well for the like pharma research. But so tell me a little bit more about the area of Roche that you operate in. It's an enormous organization, I imagine there's definitely like a unifying culture across company, but at that scale, maybe different teams operate differently. Which area of Roche do you spend your time in?
It's a huge company. Like we have 120,000 people worldwide, right? So the area that I'm in is the go-to-market domain for Roche Pharma. So also Roche has diagnostics in pharma, and I'm in Roche Pharma. And the go-to-market domain is really the commercial domain. So it's digital marketing, sales. So it's kind of the last mile. And of course, it's for me also, again, they're super interesting because you need to understand everything that happens before the last mile, which is a lot. But it's also interesting in the sense that you're a little bit closer to the patients and the healthcare system. So there I'm leading a team of 150 plus engineers that is distributed around the globe. We run a data and analytics platform in the clouds. We are responsible for the platform, but also for the global data products and what we call the affiliate or local data products. So Roche has over 150 affiliates, and we are also responsible for all the data products that we built there. So it's kind of a end-to-end responsibility, which is pretty cool, because I think if you build the products and the platform together, this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So I wanted to ground the conversation in that because you are on the like commercial last mile, as you said, part of Roche, but it's a pretty big org. And one of the things that's like always really stood out to me in working with you is how innovative you are as an organization of Roche. And I ground that in like 120,000 people. It was founded in 1896. You operate in a regulated industry. It's Zurich-based, headquartered. And as a side note, like I say, you know this, Yannick, but I spent a summer in Zurich, and just how well run that city is. It's like clockwork. So like people like, I don't view them as like very risk seeking, making sure things are like orderly and perhaps maybe a profile of conservative. But in working with you, it's been like, I don't want to say anything, but you're definitely like pushing the boundaries a lot around innovation and seeing how you can continue to do more at your organization. How do you do that? And is that hard? Is there like advice you might give to someone listening who works at a similarly large organization? How do you bring innovation into pockets of a big company?
I think I'm also a bit lucky. It has three components or three aspects really. And the first one is that innovation is really ingrained in Roche's DNA, because as a pharma company, research and development are of utmost importance. Making innovation is a crucial part of the corporate culture of Roche, and it's a driving force for us to be successful. And the second aspect is also the go-to-market domain, which covers commercial and digital marketing. I think it's a little bit less restrictive than other parts of Roche, because we aren't dealing with patient or health data per se. So we are also not creating medical devices that are highly regulated. So I think also there, the GTM domain is it's a little bit easier to drive the digital transformation. And also there, of course, the changes are happening faster, because the new generation of doctors, they're used to Netflix, Spotify, and when they interact with Roche, they have similar expectations there. So I think there is also a bit more pressure in the GTM domain. And lastly, I would also say that the team is really amazing. I think they have a culture around continuous learning and striving for perfection and pushing the boundaries that I haven't seen. I mean, at that scale, not really seen before. So I think it's really those three components that come together that make it possible to be that innovative.
So cultural permission to just keep on pushing boundaries. So you showed up 3.5, 4 years ago to Roche, and you have kind of a machine learning background. You've worked on, as we just learned, some of these like very high performance, compute intensive simulation projects. And you had to like come in from maybe a different starting point at the organization, and you had to get the basics in place before you could go work on maybe the shiny object or like maybe the machine learning stuff that you wanted to eventually get to. Can you tell me a little bit about like the roadmap you put in place? What was the starting point of Roche and the go-to-market functions, data stack when you showed up? And what was the North Star? Where are you trying to head to?
When I first started, I realized very quickly that we don't have the infrastructure that was suitable to do all this cool stuff that we wanted to do. I think it was also a good time because there was also an initial push to start to do things in the cloud, which for me was really nice because I could bring in all the experience that I already had in the cloud. So we could start to leverage that. So basically what happened as a result was we leveraged the use cases as a driving force to construct the appropriate data and analytics platform. So we almost took it as an excuse to build the platform. But equally important, I think we also recognized the necessity of demonstrating business value.
Did you have a cloud data warehouse like 3.5 years ago? No.
No, we started to build that from scratch. And for me, it was important to come up with a good strategy to start to solve those use cases, but at the same time, build something that can scale. So I think that's also what the cloud is built for, to scale. And that's what we did. The ultimate objective was really to establish a robust engineering foundation. Because for me, it's really having this foundation and also the people. It's like building a strong muscle that allows you to construct virtually everything, right? So it's not only the use cases or the platform. It's really also to build out that engineering muscle to solve for the future use cases that you want to solve.
What was maybe the hardest part of the transition from having all your data on-prem and moving it to the cloud? Was it getting it funded? Was there some hard data work that needed to happen? Was it organizational?
Technically speaking, I would say that the toughest part was how to deal with the new things that are already in the cloud, but then also the legacy systems that are not, and how to bring that together. I think this technically speaking was the hardest part. So we needed to find some shortcuts to get the data from out of legacy systems. I would say that was probably not so easy. The funding, I think if you can demonstrate value, it's something that will come naturally. But that's what I meant before, that I think it's very important that you can continuously demonstrate the added value and picking the right use cases for the right time to demonstrate that.
So this is obviously like a multi-year journey to move from on-prem to cloud. And I don't even know if you're like 100% there yet where all workloads are in the cloud. But, one of the things that stands out to me is a Harvard Business Review mentioned that chief data officers only last in their seats 2 to 2.5 years. And so if you're asking to get funded for a big technology shift that's going to take many years to show the value, like, is that a very hard sell to a chief data officer?
Did that article have some beliefs about why that was true?
I wish I read it.
It's such an interesting fact.
CIOs don't last in their seats either. And I think that's just because innovation changes quickly. It's very much making sure the business.
It's something I have to think about a lot these days too. How do you convince somebody to start on a journey that they fully recognize that they personally may not be around for the end of? It's a very different conversation than like a 3-month or 6-month process. And I don't know, this is like kind of a random thing to say, but like I went to Italy and toured a lot of cathedrals a year ago over the summer. And I mean, it's like really something how many Italian cathedrals took hundreds of years to complete. Anyway, there's something psychologically interesting about like starting a journey that that you're not going to be there for the end of.
To the chief data officer.
So cloud transitions.
It was 100 years in the realm of possibility for your transition to the cloud.
Ultimately, what needs to be there is kind of that data and analytic is a strategic imperative for the company. And then if CDOs come and go, it might not be so bad. But I think if it's really there that the data and analytic is established as a strategic priority, then I think this is something that needs to be there for sure. And then again, like I think if you demonstrate consistent delivery to build trust, because it is a lot about building trust and leading to broader organizational support beyond individual sponsorship, I think is important, right? So it's not dependent on the CDO. It's really a cultural thing. And this is ultimately the driving force. Of course, sometimes it's a bit of a dilemma because you need organizational support to get organizational support. But then again, I think if you think big, start small and scale wisely. This is what we try to do, more or less.
Maybe a little bit more pragmatically than Italian cathedrals. A lot of folks that I talk to who are trying to create support for a cloud migration, they tend to think in terms of an end goal, where an end goal is 100% migration to the cloud. And that, in the way that you're talking about this right now, it seems very, very important to create incremental progress that is not just like a check mark on a project plan, but like delivers real business value, such that the only successful milestone for the business is not some end state where you're like all in on the cloud. Have you structured your migration in this kind of way?
Yes, exactly. I mean, there were some tactical solutions. So, for example, we have a huge Oracle data warehouse on-prem. And what we did is we got a lot of data through extracts there. And on a daily basis, we extract data from the old legacy Oracle data warehouse and combine it with data that we get directly from the cloud. So this is, of course, like a tactical shortcut that we take. But of course, we needed to get that data in the cloud as well, because we needed to prepare reports that need data from both worlds. And sometimes you need to take shortcuts as a technical debt, but it's important to do that in order to demonstrate value. So I think, yes, for me, it is very important that sometimes you're more tactical in what you do. But of course, it is important, and the goal is to eventually also decommission the Oracle data warehouse, which will happen next year.
Still always amazes me that Oracle is number one on TB engines. It takes a lot to move off of a database. I want to talk a little bit about your philosophy around people, process, and technology. You're looking after an org you mentioned of 150 engineers, which is about the number of engineers that we have here at DBT Labs. So quite a lot. Tell us a little bit more about the people. Like, how do you structure your data team at Roche? We talk a lot about different roles and responsibilities of people on the data team, and I'd love to hear what works for Roche.
The people part is probably the most important part. And when I started to build out the team, I think the 40 first engineers I interviewed myself. So I paid a lot of attention who I bring on board and who does fit in. So ultimately, we grow to 150 engineers now that are organized in a metrics organization. So on one side, we have what we call the capabilities that follow pretty much a data lifecycle. So we have what we call the data engineers. Those guys are only responsible for bringing the data to the platform. So they're very good in CDK, CloudFormation, and JDBC APIs. So their only job is to bring the data in. They don't necessarily understand the data, but they bring the data in. And then we have the data analysts, business analysts. They work very closely together with the business to define the transformation rules that then are handed over to the analytics engineers that implement the data pipelines in DBT. Of course, also the information engineers. It's another capability. They work closely together. So information engineers, some other people might call them data architects. They're also very important to build reusable data products.
Where did you get that title from? I love that title.
That one stood out for me too.
Information engineers?
Yeah.
I just wanted to have engineers in the name. And then it was information architecture, right? So it was like, okay, we call it information engineers because they're still very technical. So those guys also know how to write SQL and write DBT. I mean, it's not their first priority, but they're still quite hands-on.
Julia, it made me think about our mission statement where we talk a lot about knowledge, but like the elevation above the bits and bytes to like, what is the thing that we're all actually doing here? I think it's like very important to keep people recentered on that.
I think it's very important also for knowledge, as you mentioned, knowledge sharing and then building out data products that are reusable. And I think this, for me, like the information scaling is extremely complicated. And to make things in information reusable is also extremely difficult. So I have a lot of respect. And I think maybe this information engineers, maybe it comes also from the times when I worked for Teradata, where, data warehousing and then those senior guys that knew everything about data models, etc. And I was highly impressed by that. And I think for me, it's maybe an area that is a bit overlooked, unfortunately, but it's super important.
Can you say more about what that role is or what the responsibility is? It's around which data assets have what information, or actually modeling the business knowledge into data assets. What does that role look like day to day?
This role, and we have centered our information architecture around Data Vault 2.0. So those guys are experts also in Data Vault modeling. So their job really is to design the different layers, like the logical, physical layers of the information that we have. And also they're owning actually the information areas that we bring into the platform.
You named like 5 roles, I think, on the data team. Maybe there's more.
Right. So visual analytics is the last part, right? Is more the dashboard side. But then we also have ML engineer capability because we have some machine learning workloads in production. And then Kubernetes engineering, cloud engineering, and DevOps, which a bit more on the platform side, but they're also equally important. Now, for me, what stands out is also the matrix organization that I have mentioned. So those capabilities that I have mentioned, they're led by very, very technically strong people. The tech leads of those capabilities are really, really amazing. And on the horizontal, we have the products then. And the products, they might get, analytics engineers or data analysts that help build out this data products. And we choose this data matrix for a reason, because usually the products themselves, they have a goal to deliver things fast. And from a platform perspective, your goal is to do things that are reusable. So there is naturally a bit of a friction there, right? So how do you combine that? And this is how we came up with this matrix that is trying to mitigate a little bit this friction.
So you have a large org, 150 people, you figured out kind of a matrix organization or matrix structure. Are there processes that you think have scaled really well for your organization around like who can contribute to the data warehouse or how they collaborate with their business stakeholders, what's on platform versus what's on product? Is there any process that has enabled the teams to work collaboratively, but with good velocity too?
I think the good thing again is that we're doing end-to-end platform and products. So the teams are very, very close. If there is requirements from the product side, we can push them to the platform. And also if, I don't know, we need to do a DBT update. Of course, this is not solely like a responsibility of the platform team. So we need to collaborate very closely with the product teams as well. But in general, I would say I'm also very proud of the community that we have built over those 3 years. And I mean, here we took also some inspiration from Slack, from DBT Labs. We have also Random Channel. I mean, I joke always that our Random Channel is more fun than DBT's Random Channel, but so we do the. I'm trying to post a lot of memes there, so
some salsa memes.
Exactly. So for me, ultimately, the community aspect is very important to work efficiently together and to also make the teams trust each other. I think this is also, the bigger you get, it's really, really hard. But if you have this community style, I think it helps a lot.
It is very interesting, the different way that people show up in the wider DBT community based on how large their internal teams are. So if you're a member of a 2-person or 10-person or maybe even 20-person data organization, then the wider DBT community is very helpful because you only have a certain, like a fairly modest set of humans internally that you can like draw on for knowledge and support. But once teams get 100 plus, and some are much bigger than that, we've often found them creating these kind of internal communities around their data practice. Do you have folks that participate in both, that like act as kind of bridges between the public community and this internal community?
We have, but probably not as much as I would like to. I mean, I'm
Yannick,
trying.
you do it. You write.
I should also do it a bit more often, but actually just happened last week that somebody in the internal help channel asked a question. And as a reply, I said, hey, can you just put that into the DBT Slack and ask there, and then he got some reply there. So I'm trying to push a little bit more to also leverage the DBT community that is out there. But of course, like for people, they're now used to the internal community that we have. So the first thing they do is they just go there.
it took me a while to like understand this dynamic. We were always like large enterprises and people that work there are concerned about participating in these like external communities for whatever data privacy or whatever reasons. And that's not it at all. I think it's just that like there's just a lot more people internally that you can collaborate with. And so I think the advantages of the internal community are that there's a lot of shared context that people have, but then the external community is much wider and probably brings diversity of experiences that maybe the internal group doesn't have. So I think it's a really neat topic. Like, how do you get those two groups working together?
I agree. And I would love to see that happen more in the future. And I don't know, like, what is the best way, how to do that, how to foster that. But I'm trying for sure on our side, and I'm pushing people also more into asking the questions into the DBT Slack.
This October, join data practitioners at Coalesce, the analytics engineering conference hosted by DBT Labs. It's built by data people for data people. Register at coalesce.getdbt.com with the discount code podcast23, just for our listeners. That's podcast23 with a capital P. We'll see you there. I just want to touch on the last ingredient that we talked about a lot is like people process technology. You've made a number of investments in your data stack. You don't need to name names of particular vendors, but how do you think about bringing new tools into your stack and making sure that the investment is worthwhile for the business? And would you say larger organizations are more averse to bringing in like a new tool versus maybe building it in-house, or what is the appetite to invest in different layers of the tech stack?
I would say, unfortunately, the appetite is too big. Usually I always push back. I mean, when we talk about technology, I mean, my first question will always be, what problem do you really want to solve here? Give me all the business context to help you to define the problem. I mean, I think there's this famous saying from Einstein about, if I had like 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes finding the solution. Unfortunately, tech people, and including me, we really jump on the technology too quickly. One criteria that I personally use when we decide about new technology or new architectural decision is, how difficult is it to migrate away from that potential solution? So for me, one criteria already is how to not use that technology anymore. And the second criteria is, how complicated is it to integrate with the rest of your ecosystem? And I think, unfortunately, those two things are not considered enough. It's always, you go for the best in class or whatever, and then you end up with a lot of integration problems, or you go for best in class and then you realize it's extremely hard to migrate away from it. So that's why I'm a bit hesitant of introducing new tools into the technology stack. But this is also how we worked, is really like, okay, do we already have tools that solve that problem? Then we don't need to introduce a second one. So I would always say, like, take your time in introducing new tools into your technology stack.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's like a thread. I'm not sure if it's like worth connecting, but thinking about the length of time that people spend in an organization and whether they own a lot of the like know-how or knowledge of how to get things done, and whether maybe like some tech investments to remove that key person risk that, the person who wrote some internal tool or wrote some really long analysis, like when that person leaves an organization, it can be challenging for the business. So I think in some ways, like tech does keep consistency and a steady case for an organization. We talked about CDO's length is like 2.5 years. Is that at all like a consideration for you, or you don't view that as a benefit?
That is also driving factor on architecture. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we were staying very close to SQL as a tool. And we were not going for Spark or any other like fancy technologies because there is a lot of SQL knowledge in-house that we have. So it's important to also look into what makes sense and how to move things forward, how to evolve your technology. But sometimes, introducing complicated new tools might not be the best way forward or the best next step. It might be in some time, but not now.
So you've been doing this for 3.5 years. You've made like a tremendous amount of progress in getting your Roche organization to the cloud. You have a good data platform now. Seen it be very successful for your organization in just partnering with you. What's next on your roadmap? What's the boundary that you want to keep pushing?
I think one of the biggest topics for me now is to scale more the self-service BI topic. So to create more of bigger, broader adoption of self-service BI. But that involves actually also a change of process. We were not touching so much on the process side, but for me, the process is a super important aspect. And the self-service BI, and of course also the semantic layer, which is very strongly connected to that. I think for me, those are the next step function changes that I can see that could have a tremendous effect on the organization itself. Beyond that, I would also say that to democratize like the advanced analytics topic, which if you think analytics tech stack is complicated, then MLOps tech stack is a disaster. I mean, this is really still extremely hard to do machine learning engineering. It's too complicated. But I think this is also something that we want to push for. We have already some MLOps workloads in production. And for us, this is, of course, is also a very important topic to push the advanced analytics use cases more as well.
I love that you said self-service BI. If, as an industry, we can make real progress on that over the coming 5-10 years, I think that would be such a net positive. It is also something that people have been talking about for a very long time. I'm curious, other than your kind of inherently optimistic nature, what makes you feel like that is tackleable at this point in time?
Ultimately, people want to be enabled. At least that's what they claim. It's self-service BI, we can go there. But I mean, also from my personal experience now, deploying the platform and talking to the end users, it was funny because many of them, they're screaming for self-service BI. And then if you give them self-service BI, they're like, oh, can you build that dashboard for me, please? And then I'm like, no, you build it yourself. This is what self-service BI is, right? Again, it's people need to get used to do hands-on stuff themselves again, which, is a big shift again in the process, because that's not something people, especially on the business side, wanted to do. I think it's also a bit tricky because it puts also IT a bit in a difficult spot. It's like, okay, what is my purpose now? Business is enabled to do business intelligence themselves. Like, what is my job now, right? So I think it's intrinsically a hard problem to establish self-service BI because there's all those factors that work against it.
We're going to wrap up here. We're going to do our famous closing question, but we ask this to all our guests. Looking 10 years out, what do you hope will be true for the data industry?
Going again with people, process, and technology, I would say on the people side, I hope that in 10 years, we have more data literacy and a stronger engineering culture across the companies. Also, I hope that there is no discussion about business versus IT anymore. So it's everybody is one team, doesn't matter. Everybody has IT background, has business background. On the process side, I hope that we see a continue of the evolution from ETL to ELT to what people call like zero ETL. So basically that we don't need to move data around anymore so that the transactional and the analytical system that get closer together. And then on the technology part, I hope that we will have more open standards in 10 years. So I'm a big fan of the open table format. I hope we're moving into more that direction, that we have more interoperability and more options to do stuff with different technology stacks.
We have a lot of similar hopes. This has been a lot of fun. As always, thank you for coming on the show and sharing a little bit more about your work at Roche.
Thanks, Yannick. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Analytics Engineering Podcast is sponsored by DBT Labs and is hosted by Tristan Handy and myself, Julia Schottenstein. Have comments, questions, or guest suggestions? Email us at podcast@dbtlabs.com. Our producers are Jeff Fox and Dan Poppy. If you enjoy the show, please drop a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening.